It's been a long time that we haven't seen each other, so that we start with socializing this way, and then before proceeding to the panel discussion. It indeed has been a while before we were able to have in-person communication and meetings that we usually do. But I want to welcome all of you today at this very important panel discussion that we are about to proceed in a minute or so. It's a troubled world in many ways that we are living in 2020, and then we've had many occasions that we've discussed at different meetings of the center that we've organized in different places of the world, challenges of the future, how profound the shifts in geopolitical environment or economic platforms and frameworks of our coexistence are for the modern world. But at the same time, we're in a very particular situation where we are now, where our friends and colleagues in the region and in Azerbaijan, in my own region of origin, Caucasus, are facing at this moment. So the discussions that we'll have today is relevant to the global discussions as they are on the issues that we will discuss today when we speak about relevance of public international law, international organizations in applying international law as a foundation for stability, peace, and prosperity for all of us. But at the same time, it is a very specific context environment in which we're having this conversation. So I'm sure that we will have an ample opportunity of making that relative to the situation as it is, and then giving an examples of how public international law, how this beautiful tool of making coexistence of sovereign nations more predictable and orderly could be better used and applied for that to have the effect of the kind for which the founding fathers of rule of law and international relations devised it for the development. I will be very short in my own introduction so that we have a live contributions during the discussion and more of a conversation. We had a short notice, all of us, to organize this event, and I thank you, all of you, for being responsive and confirming your participation on behalf of the center, on behalf of myself, that we could organize ourselves and to do it almost in a spontaneous way. But this is important for us to have this conversation, to share our views, and for our viewers to have the benefit of being part of this conversation through the live stream of this conversation that we'll have through the Facebook of Nizami Ganjavi Center as well. So what I would start with at the beginning are some house rules, so to say. I would appreciate if we could limit our introductory remarks to 5, maybe 7 minutes maximum, but 5 would be much better of an option for us to start the conversation with the main points that you would want to raise today. And then we'll go with a Q&A session so that we have a dialogue. I'll be very attentive to all of you as much as I can on the screen so that I can have a notice and proper time of any hand raised by you, or so that I understand that you want to build on some of the arguments and follow up to the questions, so that I give that opportunity as a moderator to all of you. But excuse me from the very beginning if through this virtual environment I will not be as attentive to all of you that otherwise I would have been if we would have been all sitting around the table. If there will be any omissions from my side, Rovshan, I'm sure will give a hand to that as well, so that please let me know, Rovshan, through the chat room as well, if there is anybody from our esteemed group of speakers that I need to pay attention, if there is anything that they want to raise as an issue, and if you notice that. When it comes to the theme as a subject matter of our consideration, I'm an international lawyer myself, public international law, international relations. I can speak endlessly about international law, but that's not the aim that we have today for us to have for the discussion, but rather to dig deeper perhaps to the core of a matter, whether or not in the challenging times where we experiencing tectonic shifts, so to say, in the geopolitical environment globally, public international law retains its capacity of serving as a preventer of the crisis, so to say, so that the whole purpose of prevention of the crisis is served by international law, or if the crisis arises, that public international law is the measure of first resort for solving the crisis rather than might that becomes a necessity for solving the crisis that could be a dragged problem for years and if not the decades in some situations as we know it. When we speak about public international law, we are well aware that this unprecedented burst of the scale of development of international law was very well founded into the common reflection of humanity of how much the devastation of the Second World War was brought to all of us, to the human race, with use of force and then with erroneous decisions of so many at the time. And then the common decision as a reflection at the time was that for peace and stability and economic prosperity, the better option was to develop the law as a way of mitigating differences, as a way of creating conducive environment for economic development, for trade, for peaceful coexistence of nations. And in that regard, we've seen even unprecedented at the time level of development of human rights law as well as a separate branch and body of law in public international law. We have experienced development, a very impressive development of international organizations such as UN, the whole premise of which rests in so many ways on the notion of collective common security. However, we still have a framework which rests on a special role that is played by the Security Council by few within that commonality of the interests of the states that are represented in the UN, which is a custodian of that common security up until now. And we see the limitations of that framework for the past decades in the way that how Security Council was or was not able, more to say, to play the role that it is supposed to play for the prevention of conflicts or for the resolution of the conflicts in that regard. So simply to say, how can we assess as of now the capacity and potency in that sense of international law to play that role, especially within the framework of international organizations, of preventing conflicts, but then not only preventing, but then for ensuring that there are ways of peaceful resolution of the conflicts. And more than that as well, or in parallel to that, better to say, whether or not we see that law is still the framework through which economic development and prosperity could be better ensured in modern world, rather than through competition or the trade wars, or what we see now goes beyond the purview of what was previously perhaps an understanding how in a globalized world, in an orderly and predictable manner, relationships between the states and non-state actors even related to international law as a consumers of international law could have been predicted. I understand that there are many issues, many angles that could be touched upon. That is why we have an extreme luxury of having an esteemed group of members as you are participating in the panel discussion so that we could have different angles, layers of these questions touched by you. And as I've said, I'm sure that we will be able to make that relevant and then linked to what is going on now in our own homelands, in our own regions, and particularly what is taking place now in Caucasus with the inflamed war, and then to have a discussion that I'm sure will be very, very inclusive for all of us in this regard. At least that's my goal here. So I will try to go ahead with the list as it is provided to me of the participants of the panels. All of you are very high-ranking representatives in the panel, as we all know, so I don't want to go through the protocol-related, perhaps, expectations that we could have had, and I'll start with the list as we have it for the participants. Rovshan, I wanted to check if Mr. Elmin Aliyev is with us as well, because I can't see him in the link.
He's not with us.
No. Okay, so that Abdulaziz, I will start with you then with the first remarks that you could give to us. If possible, within 5 minutes, that could be wonderful. If not, we will be glad to hear views beyond that as well, above the 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eka, and I greet my friends who are participating in this panel, and thank my friend Rovshan Muradov for his continuous activities and care for bringing us even online. What are we witnessing nowadays in many parts of the world is not really comforting. because the United Nations, as an entity created to protect peace and maintain peace and security in the world, is completely out of the scene now. You can see what is happening in the region, in Nagorno-Karabakh, which is a very harsh war, and in Yemen, in Libya, in Syria, in other parts of the world, you know. And as you said, the world was witnessing the creation of the United Nations after the Second World War with hopes and aspirations. But unfortunately, their hopes and aspirations went astray, went in vain, because there were many conflicts and wars that erupted and killed hundreds of thousands of people in different parts of the world. And in Vietnam, during the Cold War between the Eastern Bloc and the Western Bloc, the wars in Afghanistan, Somalia, the continuous animosity between India and Pakistan, India and China, and now with this, you know, fluid situation in the world where there is no good and strong leadership. The gentleman who is in the White House is a clown. He is acting unpresidentially, despite the power and the capabilities of the United States as the biggest superpower in the world. It's not helping. It's not. It is increasing the tension and adding oil to the fire. I think the example of the war now that is erupting between Azerbaijan and Armenia over the occupied Azeri territories that have been occupied for more than 30 years. And all of us know that there are 4 UN security resolutions asking the Armenian forces to withdraw unconditionally. This war is also a sign of the inability of the United Nations as a system which is entitled and trusted with maintaining peace and security in the world, and mainly the Security Council itself, which issued those 4 resolutions, and the other wars that are erupting, and the problem of the Palestinian people, and many other things. So let us hope that the conscience of the world wake up, because it is enough of wars and killings and destruction and animosities, and making people look at each other as enemies rather than, you know, friends and neighbors and people who want to work together to maintain peace and security in the world and establish genuine cooperation that will benefit all people of the world. So I am really dismayed by what I see, because we all in the Nizami Ganjavi International Center, we all work for peace, for understanding, for respect of human dignity, of human rights, of coexistence, of cooperation on the, you know, field of commonalities between nations and cultures and religions. But the world is now is a jungle, and it is frightening. You add that to that, this COVID-19, which kept us in our homes, and the world is in standstill. We cannot travel, we cannot meet, we cannot act as we used to do, although our work was not that strong, but, you know, it is much better than what we are doing right now, staying in our homes, and our movement is very limited. I would finish my intervention by saying that it is an ethical and legal responsibility of the United Nations and its Security Council to wake up and implement the Charter of the United Nations. Implement it with faith, with good intention, and with justice, so we can find solutions for all these problems and all these conflicts, and make peoples all over the world live in peace and harmony. I know this is an idealistic idea and thoughts, but it can happen. Otherwise, we will continue to live in such a very troublesome world, and that is not good for us and not for the coming generations.
I'm unmuting myself. Thank you very much. Very, very clear message from your side that UN as a system perhaps not failed fully, if one would be not as critical to that, but it is not matching the needs or the challenges of today quite clearly as well. So in that regard, part of the discussion that we will have today as well, I'm sure we'll come back to that as well. What is the role of the UN for it to be a relatively relevant, at least, player in this regard of either the Security Council or the General Assembly as an added element to the whole structure of that. But quite clearly, and if we can see that now within the context of the war in Caucasus and in Azerbaijan, it's UN is not present, if one may say so. There is no shuttle diplomacy. There is no active role of any kind that is being played as of now. And quite clearly, the limitations are difficult to hide in this case for this situation, and then not only. Dear Maria, you for your introductory remarks.
Well, thank you very much, Eka, and thank you to all the panelists today, and of course, big thank you to the Nizami Ganjavi International Center for a very pertinent dialogue on the role of international organizations and international law during crisis situations. And if you allow me, let's go back to the COVID pandemic that we had the opportunity to exchange some thoughts at the beginning. I think the COVID-19 pandemic has been described as the crisis of the century, but it has been also an opportunity if we can seize it together. There is no doubt that the crisis that we are facing as we speak is having profound implications in human life, in human dignity, in our fundamental rights. And we have seen from access to education, to health services, to freedom of movement and violence and conflict. So, to make the story short, in consequence, our efforts should be geared towards recovery and building back better our societies. So there is nothing more opposed to development, to human rights, to peaceful coexistence and human security than war. And that has been a historical fact. And I here would like to just recall that the United Nations history has also been the history of international law in a way. So over the past 75 years, the UN has provided the framework for international laws, norms, mechanisms on everything, from the promotion of human rights and gender equality to the regulation of nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons. So the normative role of the UN, I think, has been irreplaceable. It's a machine of international law, and the Charter of the United Nations and the Statute of the International Court of Justice were signed at the same time. So these two elements, the political front and the legal front, are mutually reinforcing and core of our international system. So I think that these frameworks have often proved to be successful. I think that if we speak about the Montreal Protocol, for instance, on the ozone layer, or the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, who in the 1960s would have thought that the number of nuclear armed states would still be in single digits today. And of course, our aim is to have 0 countries, but at least the Non-Proliferation Treaty has partially done its job, performed its job. So I think that, these gains, this international law architecture and the mechanisms on almost every aspect of human life and planetary resource, as mentioned. Today, millions of people live longer, healthier and freer lives as a result of multilateral action. So we should not lose faith But on the other side, we should be very mindful that these gains are now at risk. We are witnessing the rise of extreme nationalism, which is impacting on hard-won multilateral agreements and institutions, and conflicts bursting, old and new, as the one you just described. We are witnessing go-it-alone responses to the COVID-19 pandemic. We are witnessing a profound trust crisis. Some countries have decided, for example, to withdraw from key multilateral bodies, starting from WHO and the Human Rights Council, just to cite a few. So unless we reverse this, we risk damaging the international system on which we all depend, especially the most vulnerable countries, global South countries. And more than that, we risk to go back to war, in a war that could wipe us out, So our discussion today is not an academic discussion. It is about our future. It is about our survival. It is about peace, about sustaining peace. It is about human security. And if you allow me, I don't know how I am doing with time.
You are doing fine with the time. Yeah.
Okay. So let's go back to the COVID crisis example, because that's the one who is more, present in our lives. I think that the COVID-19 has changed our world forever, and it risks to produce serious regressions in rights and development. We are witnessing, as we speak, what we call, well, not me, but Marcel Mauss, a total social fact, since it is affecting every aspect of our life. The public health crisis has become an economic and social crisis, and a protection and human rights crisis rolled into one. So today, more than ever, we need a strong, predictable, reliable international law systems to deliver on the three pillars of the UN Charter. The peace and security pillar, the human rights pillar, and the development pillar. I think that this has been translated into a very, very powerful social contract in our current starting point, which is the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals. So I think that to go back to the initial question, international law is the strongest tool for human coexistence, for weaving the balance needed for a sustainable world between economic interest, nature's integrity, and human dignity. I think that international law can protect, as mentioned, those that are most vulnerable to abuse, to oppression, to harm. International law can be, if used properly, the voice of the speechless, including the voice of nature, if I may say. So we just ended a couple of weeks of UN 75 anniversary global conversation. And I think this global conversation has only reaffirmed the global growing recognition that we urgently need a stronger multilateral and rules-based international system. And that's a fact. I think that after 75 years, we know that the only thing that can make us immune to conflict and war is international cooperation, is concerted action, it's solidarity. And as Mr. Abdulaziz Altwaijri just mentioned, basically we need leadership. And when I'm asked, and when I was president of the United Nations General Assembly, everywhere I traveled, I was asked, but what is the UN doing, or where is the UN, and why is the UN absent of X or Y conflict? My response was, who is the UN? We are the UN. The UN is not a self-operating machine. It is not, it is form of the convergence of political will from around the world. The General Assembly has 193 voices that have the same power to vote, the same power to speak, the same power to exercise their role as member states, and the Security Council as well. But we are also civil society that has the responsibility to operate. So there are so many leaders, so many voices, and what we need is to bring leadership closer to power. Power is the key issue now and today. I think that just let's imagine if we didn't have the rule of law as the foundation of our post-war multilateral system. I cannot even imagine what would be our current, the current circumstances. So, and yet again, I think that it's not only the UN Charter, it's every international instrument is speaking about peaceful coexistence, is speaking about basically addressing conflict with the only tool that is meaningful and that has sustained outcomes and benefit, which is dialogue and negotiation. And that's what we need. Dialogue, negotiation, and peaceful means using the tools of international law that we have in hand. And thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Maria. Very, very interesting point of how much normative basis as the law itself represents itself is a point of reference for making our lives more predictable and orderly in that sense. The beauty, but then the weak point of international law is always the horizontal nature of international law. We don't have a hierarchy as we have in national laws of an enforcer, but it used to be in different times of history a strong side of it, because the fact that the law was there already meant that there was readiness to implement it. So the principle of pacta sunt servanda was a foundational premise of international law. And on the other hand, the expulsion of the normative basis in international law in multilateral settings, while developing so many aspects of the development at multilateral level, blurred a bit the line of how firm the readiness of implementation is reflected at times by those who sign off to the obligations of the treaties. And perhaps we are at this stage of transition now to see which are the rules that hold in terms of that readiness and which needs to be developed even further. And I believe that international law and international community in that regard will be able to go through this transition in such a ways that we will opt for predictability and stability in this regard, rather than fragmentation of the set of the rules for different countries, for different regions, and especially not to go back to the situation where it's just might that makes the decision. So only the big powers could make decisions for those who are around them, small or medium size in that regard. I will switch now to the Ekmeleddin to give the floor to him with the introductory remarks, if you may so.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you. Very kind of you. First of all, let me greet you and the Secretariat of Nizami Ganjavi International Center and all distinguished panelists. I have been following the discussions, but before I make any statement, I would like to express my condolences for the lives of those people who were killed in the last week due to the aggression of the Armenian forces on Nagorno-Karabakh and on the Azeri territories. One thing makes this meeting of this panel timely and significant, that the center we are meeting through carries the name of Ganja, where attacks, illegitimate attacks on civilian peoples are taking place. Ganja is the place where Nizami Ganjavi came. So Nizami Ganjavi came from Ganja, where Ganja is a part and parcel of the territory of the Republic of Azerbaijan, and it is under attack, targeting civilians. Coming to the main question about how to make international law, I think after all the very well thought interventions about the international law, we can say that international law comes through the work of international organizations, particularly United Nations. There is no doubt on that, because the resolutions and decisions of these international organizations are adopted by the sovereign countries and becomes a matter of internal law. So in other words, the resolutions and decisions adopted through international organizations present the act and will of states. And when you have a convention agreed by certain countries, it has to be implemented. But of course, there are certain limitations to the United Nations. We have to not avoid this. We have to be fully minded by this, and we have to take it in consideration. United Nations came as an international structure as outcome of the Second World War. And the power structure in the United Nations, particularly in the Security Council, is reflective of the power balance equilibrium happened after the Second World War. It is now more than 70 years that this order is over. And by the end of bipolar international regime, again, it's over. Emerging new powers, it is over. Changing world is dramatically happening, but still the power remains in certain 5 countries out of 192 or 93 countries. The Charter of the United Nations gives power to the Security Council. In the UN Charter, Chapter 7, Article 41 and Article 42. Article 41 reads that Security Council may decide that measures not involving the use of armed force are to be employed to give effect to its decisions. And it may call upon the members of the United Nations to apply such measures. It may call upon. This may include complete or partial interruption of economic relations and of all rail, sea, air, postal, telegraphic, radio, and other means of communication, and severance of diplomatic nations. This is Article 41. Article 42 says if what is mentioned in Article 41 is applied and no result, then you apply force. And it reads, should the Security Council consider that measures provided by the Article 41 would be inadequate or have proved to be inadequate, it may take such action by air, sea, and land forces as may be necessary to maintain or restore international peace and security. Such action may include demonstrations, blockade, and other operations by air, sea, or land forces of member states of the United Nations. When we look to these articles, we have to raise the question, since we are meeting through Ganjavi Research Center. Did UN apply this to Karabakh, occupied land of Karabakh? No, it didn't. Why? Because of the 5 members don't agree. So the limitation in international implementation of international law, of the implementation of take the 4 resolutions of the Security Council, immediate withdrawal, calling Armenia to immediate withdrawal from occupied lands. 4 resolutions. very clear, explicit, but nothing happened. And the General Assembly also had many resolutions. Nothing happens. So now when I will take it to the political level, when President Ilham Aliyev say that we don't accept to talk with the other side unless they withdraw from occupied lands, I think he has the right. Because this is not a personal or national ambition or request. It is a mandate of Security Council resolutions, binding ones. So the international law needs to be readdressed against through structural build-up. We have to think there have been for decades, and for 10 years as Secretary of OIC, I witnessed many attempts to reform United Nations, and I participated in some of them. And we don't forget how late Kofi Annan was very mindful about that. But he failed, and we all failed. And it looks that we will fail for a long time to come. So international law, as not only as a piece of paper full of nicely written, carefully crafted and drafted clauses and articles, but also as operative clauses should be reconsidered through the prisma of restructuring United Nations, because there is no other way of doing things. Take the 30 years frozen Nagorno-Karabakh, take the 70 years old Palestinian issue, take so many issues all around the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much for very insightful and strong statements. And indeed, if not to hit only the UN in this regard, we see that at the regional level as well, with the organizations like OSCE, for example, where the normative basis is very strong, and then tools supposedly for the engagement, especially in the conflict-driven situations. An actual outcome of so many processes in this regard is rather frozening of the conflicts rather than having an actual resolution that could come in time and then with strength that could create the foundation for stable resolution of the conflict. And this whole disease of frozen conflicts that has spread in so many places is an active minefield in so many ways for so many societies and then the regions, which can be reignited at different times with different agendas of external forces or internal forces. It doesn't even matter at the end of the day, because it is a failure of the peaceful resolution processes and tools, and those tools that could have been in other circumstances actively used by international organizations such as UN and OSCE. For example, if we stay within the limits of the region that we are discussing now, rather than having something that could have delivered in time, the resolution of the kind that could not spread this for generations and within the generations. And we already have in so many countries generations that are born and raised and are growing up as next and next generations, as generations who are still living in unresolved conflicts, which are called frozen conflicts in brackets, but these are their lives, and this is something that is dragged in decades. And definitely in this regard, it's very hard to say that in situations like that, international law managed to deliver resolution of the crisis. It might have contained perhaps the effects of devastation at some point of time, but the effects very, very limited, have been very limited, not even are very limited in this regard. Dear Faris, I'll switch to you if I proceed with the list for your introductory remarks.
Thank you very much. Again, I would like to say that I'm greatly honored to be included into this discussion. I am young member of this group, and I represent Adhere University in Baku. But thank you to Nizami Ganjavi Center for inviting me. As a person who is living in Baku and experiencing turmoil times, difficult times, I would like to say that 27 years of negotiations, 27 years of peace talks, unfortunately did not bring any results, and Azerbaijani occupied territories still remained under occupation by Armenian military forces despite UN resolutions. We saw that the new Prime Minister of Armenia has been pushing for the change of format, has been threatening with the occupation of new territories. We saw attacks on Azerbaijani towns in July, which are very close to pipelines, which is threatening energy security of the Europe. All of this escalation has led to this September war. And we see that, now the military activities are happening not only in Karabakh, but also in many other towns of Azerbaijan, including Ganja and Mingechevir, home of a big electric station. So things are not very good. Things are not very stable. Many civilians are being attacked. Many civilians are dying. I think this is a rather historic moment, because after 27 years of waiting, 27 years of peace talks and occupation, I think Azerbaijan is determined to return its occupied territories and restore its territorial integrity as it is required by UN resolutions. I think Azerbaijan is going to continue these counter-attack, meaning that we are determined to liberate our towns. And I think liberation of Jabrail was a huge success for our military. And I think that the peace talks can resume soon, only on the one condition. Condition is that there has to be a concrete schedule provided by Armenian leadership when Armenian military forces will liberate occupied territories. So no longer negotiations for the sake of negotiations, no longer abstract, vague promises, but result-based, substantive, concrete promises, concrete negotiations. And President Aliyev clearly said that the peace can only be established if there is a concrete schedule for withdrawal of Armenian troops. We appreciate the support of international community. We believe that international community is on the side of law and UN resolutions and international documents. We appreciate the support of our neighbors. None of the countries that are surrounding the region have really expressed support for Armenia except France. And for that, I think Minsk group co-chairs should be changed. And I think France is being very biased in this situation. We need to think about a new format for mediators. I will stop here, and I will be happy to answer some questions later on if you have something. Thank you.
Thank you, Fariz. I can only add that it's, I can only imagine, I would say, but judging from the experiences that I went myself through the conflict situations in my own country in the active wars, it's very frustrating when you don't see any potent diplomacy from international partners that could bring resolution closer to the reality. And in this situation, what we observe now, it's quite striking that even at the level of active shuttle diplomacy, at least so an outsider, which I am now, being outside of the region here in Ukraine, that I observe very attentively every day the developments, it seems to be missing. If I hope I'm exaggerating rather than otherwise, but it seems certainly so that at the level of diplomatic efforts, it's shockingly missing in terms of any active steps in this regard, which is desperately needed, definitely, to bring a clear pathway, shaping up the clear pathway for the peaceful resolution of the situation. Dear Amre, I'll turn to you for the introductory remarks. You are muted. You have to unmute your microphone.
Okay.
Yeah, perfect.
All right. Thank you very much. First of all, I'm glad to meet all my old friends. Long time has passed since we met and had some problems, but this is a good opportunity for us to talk about the present situation, present international situation, and the state of the rule of law and the role of the UN, and a look to the future. I must say I listened carefully and appreciate all the arguments that have been mentioned. by my friend and brother Abdulaziz and Akmal and Maria, also Paris. Arguments are strong, the positions are clear, but let me say the following. There are three major stations in the modern history of the world. First one was the end of World War II that produced the United Nations system with the international law conventions, with the basic human rights laws, with the policies for development, and with a role to preserve international peace and security, and put hot wars behind our backs. The second major station was the end of the Cold War that has produced the system of the one superpower leading the world, with all the consequences that we all know. And then the third one was the advent of the pandemic corona and the expectations that it will leave behind it, or it would lead to a new system of relations. So those three major stations and three major results are shaping the background for us to think of what should be done and what should we expect as a result of the events that have accompanied the pandemic. We cannot, and I don't think that it is easy to say, let us replace the UN, or let us call for the application and respect of international law, etc. It is good feelings, but it is not practical at all. We have to look into what happened with a critical eye. First of all, the UN system succeeded in the beginning. New organizations, new life, new debates, new interaction, etc. But I must say, and I believe that all of you agree with me, that the United Nations system has one major aspect, which is the maintenance of international peace when it comes to regional organizations, when it comes to specialized agencies in food, in agriculture, in health, in scientific science and literature and so on. In fact, the specialized agency system has succeeded in varied degrees. We can talk about WHO, its failures and also its successes, and the degree of failure and the degree of success. This applies to FAO, to ILO, and to all other organizations. But here, there was signs of success and incidents of success in international cooperation. But the Security Council is the problem. That is well paralyzed for so many years, but in particular, after the end of the Cold War. We have seen, and also the General Assembly could not address the issue properly, adopt necessary resolutions to guarantee or to push for international cooperation and give the necessary instructions by way of resolutions to the specialized agencies concerned, to the WHO, to the international the regional organization and so on, to take the necessary measures to follow certain procedures in order to put into effect a meaningful international cooperation with the basic rules I wish to put before you pertaining to the increasing or the still continuing regional conferences, regional conflicts, the last of which was the Nagorno-Karabakh or Nagorno-Karabakh, but the existing through decades and years the Palestinian question, and many other conflicts within we see in Libya, as we see in Ukraine, and we see that in fact plague the international situation, the international theater, with a lot of bloodshed and a lot of loss of lives and stability in those countries. Where is the Security Council? The Security Council could not perform and could not perform the leadership that the Council should have shown when the world meets a serious crisis. Secretary-General Guterres of threats to international peace and security. It's not only the conflicts, border conflicts, or the historic conflicts, the well-known conflicts. There are 3 or 4 issues that have been elevated to a high degree of threats to peace, to security, to the international system. One of them is the pandemics. What happened with the pandemic, the corona pandemic, is unprecedented. This is a threat to international peace and security that requires coordination, requires cooperation, requires rules of engagement, requires leaders towards that end. And as we haven't seen, the leader of the Western world, the leader of the world, leading the world in that same direction. Therefore, we have to work towards maintaining a certain discipline, paving the road towards future cooperation and in different state of mind. And I believe that the civil society, international civil society, will have to show its persistence, insistence to play a role, since the international system itself, system of states, is not giving the necessary results in time of crisis. The international civil society will have to come in. The international civil society that brings together so many forces from so many countries, from so many continents, from so many even conflicting countries, but people are sitting together, are talking together, trying to create a new situation. So the issue is international civil society should find a place for itself in the new system by going to the UN, talking in the Security Council, talking in the General Assembly, and the procedures do allow that. But we must organize the civil society in order to make its voice heard and strongly heard. As I say, tools are there, procedures do allow such intervention, but we have not used that as we should have done. The second point, and here comes Nagorno-Karabakh, as comes Palestine, as comes all other conflicts. The international system has led the world into a game. The game was called to manage the conflict situations. You don't have to solve it. Manage the crisis. Bring them together. Let them sit at the table, around the table, talk to each other. Then if you find that they are not really reaching that, call them again. But this time should not be in tents or in mountains. They should be in Paris. They should go to Rome. They should go to big capitals and sit together. It becomes a life by itself. Manage the crisis. Sit together. Write papers, initiatives, facts. As has been named recently, the century, the fact of the century, the things of that kind that captures the attention of the world, but without the tools, the means to reach a fair agreement to solve the problems. So managing the crisis rather than solving the problems is a very serious danger to all those who feel they have the right to achieve the goals they want to achieve, their national goals.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, I would...
And I'm making a small reminder of the timing, Amre.
Thank
as
you
a
very
moderator.
much for this. The result of what we are facing today is that we are moving towards within a traditional period that may take a long time. But this transitional period has new symptoms, not only a pandemic, but also an emerging superpower and a very, what can I say, tense superpower. And all other powers have question marks and exclamation marks, and we do not know exactly where are we going. Therefore, this is by way of introduction, I have raised a question mark, only a question mark, and then I'll come back to that in my second intervention. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amre. Very, very powerful points. As usual, coming from you. Pay attention and highlight the core of what you've said with the management of the conflict. This approach of process-oriented management of the conflict has brought disillusionment in so many ways with the international system and with the norms of international law for generations that have been raised in these times of management of the conflict they had to live through. And we see that populism, extreme nationalism in some countries that penetrates well in the electorate in so many countries comes exactly as an effective tool for the generations which have experienced that process of management of the conflicts in their lives, when the usual word sometimes for them becomes that international community is gravely concerned with something, but then it's very little that could be done about it when it comes to the actual results. So hopefully part of the transition would be the ways of finding how we could treat the root causes of the problems rather than managing the outcomes of that as the temporary outcomes we would hope. Mr. Aliyev, I see that you already joined us for some time, but then we proceeded with the event according to the list of the speakers. But maybe it's even better now, so that you will have concluding introductory remarks. So that please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Yes, indeed, we have some connection issues here in the office. Indeed, very important opinions were raised, and basically I would like to associate myself with all of them. But I think that what's happening in Azerbaijan now, it's a good test for international law. It's a good test for international community. UN, definitely, I think the major achievement of the UN is that now we have specific borders of the countries, because as we are all member countries in terms of the statehood, we are all countries, we are all members of the UN. I think that the first implication of it that we have agreed on our borders. This is very important. I think that comes before even any normative role of the UN specifically. So I think that this is the fundamental level of how UN member states shall treat and perceive each other. I think that, and from Azerbaijani perspective, if you look at the last 27 years, we have passed different stages of international hypocrisy, what we call it here. It was camouflaged as international diplomacy, and it was very meticulously done so. And what was happening since 27th of September, in fact, unfolded many faces. Frankly speaking, I believe if we convene the same UN Security Council resolution today, it will not be able to reach the same conclusions as it reached in 1993. And I think that in order to understand what is happening in terms of international law, just looking at the differences and why, and I am reasonably sure that it will not happen again. So it's very interesting to see what has changed. What has changed since 1993? And I think that one of the answers could be what was raised by Mr. Amre Moussa, that at that time Soviet Union collapsed. And it was it was an earthquake in terms of international law, international system. And the major powers did not adopt international law at that time to their own needs. But if you look from a small state perspective, and I think that the only small states normally speak about law, speak about the system, because this is their only protection and their only reference that they can do. So if you look from the small state perspective, international law has three-dimensional aspect. It works when big powers are neutral to the issue. So in that case, international law may work. International law also enforced and works when the big powers are directly interested in this. And the third issue that we have seen, and unfortunately that was the case of Azerbaijan, that international law does not work when it contradicts the interest of the big powers. I think that we as an international community of the state shall add the fourth dimension. And this is a good chance at the moment in terms of what's happening in Azerbaijan, because let's make the voices of the small countries to be heard. So today, from a legal perspective, there is no issue. There is no disputed territories. There is no any additional exercise to be done from the law point of view to decide on the issue, right? This is if you talk to the lawyers, everybody agrees on this. And I think that all states, all 183 UN member states, they have enough lawyers to understand this. I understand big powers. They have vested interests. They consider themselves big, and I will come back later on to a specific one, which contradicts itself historically, legally. Okay, let's keep the big powers aside. What about the other ordinary states, which shall be interested by their nature in upbringing the international law, prioritizing the international law? And unfortunately, sitting here in Azerbaijan, we don't see this. We don't see this that the normal countries are saying this is the right of Azerbaijan to liberate their land according to international law. Everybody's afraid. I'm sorry to say this. Everybody's shying away. But this is something very crucial, fundamental. So law becomes a law when we treat it as a law before enforcement. Whatever is written on the paper can be a book, can be whatever, and it can be on the shelf. It will not become a law unless first we treat this as a law, as a majority. Here, when we talk about UN, as a majority member states. And then let's see why it is not enforced. So unfortunately today, and everybody, what's happening in Azerbaijan, I think if you are not biased, it's pretty much clear. If you are not brainwashed by Armenian diaspora, if you are not poisoned by the Armenian ideology, it's pretty much clear. But look, this clearness, is it reflected in the reaction of the UN member states? No. And I think this is the attitude to international law. This is not attitude to Azerbaijan. This is, and I think that here we cannot blame big powers. They are big. What about others? So this is, I think that is what is lacking international law perspective, from the UN perspective, that still we don't consider ourselves as a global community. We don't, we are shy or we are weak enough to voice our opinion for a global cause. I think this is what's happening with international law, that we are not ripe as a global community, because UN, even UN itself, was invented for the rest of the world by the big powers. So it was not a natural process when everybody came together and agreed on the UN. So even UN itself was granted to the rest of the world, and it was designed to be applied to everybody else. So you cannot be a state today if you are out of the UN. This is clear, right? So, but okay, since we have it, all individual member states, do we all, in fact, interested in international law? Do we believe that the only protection we have as a state that we others? No, what's happened is very from that perspective. And more than this, I would like to refer to Monsieur Macron. I think he was Last 10 days, he was demonstrating the master class of hypocrisy. Perfect hypocrisy, in fact. I think it's very difficult to beat him now. His country is the co-chair of the UN Security Council. He is the co-chair of the Minsk group. He is the guy whose country suffered from the fascism. And I would like to note here that there were only two nations in Europe which were claiming for the exclusivity. Nazi Germany and Armenians. If you don't know, Armenians are claiming for exclusivity. They are saying we are pure nation. The president of Armenia, he was saying we are incompatible with Azerbaijanis, openly. Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, which is not an Azerbaijani body, which is not even Turkish body, they concluded that the Armenians perpetrated ethnic cleansing. So how do you as a nation come up with ethnic cleansing? You have to bear in mind fascism, ideas of fascism. This is the only way you can come to this. And France, which suffered the most, and Azerbaijanis were fighting for liberation of France. Now the president of the same country and coming and telling us, no, Armenia is not fascism. They are exclusive. They have right for ethnic cleansing. Put this aside. They're contradicting themselves as the member of the Security Council. Put this aside. What's happening today is the failure of the Minsk group co-chairs. Clear. But despite of this, look at the behavior of what you call one of the leaders of the free world. I'm sorry, with all due respect to the world and the ideas of the freedom, he is not a leader and there is no free world. And I think that the UN and what's happening with international law, the way we treat it, be it small state, big state, means that this world still recognizes only power. You have to be powerful, then you will be right. And this last 7 days, I think, demonstrated the same. You know, now when Azerbaijan has made significant progress on the battlefield, now we are receiving the voices, yes, Azerbaijan has the right to liberate its land, Azerbaijan territorial integrity is sacred. So we're at the 7th of September. So I think that, you know, international law is good to refer to the big states, but there are very few big states. Most of the states, they are regional states. Most of the states, they are small states. And unfortunately, international law has weaknesses due to the majority of the states, not due to 3 or 4 states. I understand here the Security Council. I think that I fully agree that the Security Council concept and composition is outdated. And again, Monsieur Macron is a good embodiment and the proof of it. And I think that there should be a way, I agree with Dr. Ekmeleddin regarding the efforts of the late Kofi Annan, but there should be a way we have to amend the system. Otherwise, today Azerbaijan is a victim, tomorrow somebody else is victim. And unless we come up with this clear opinion of the most of the states, I mean, qualified majority of the states, we should find a way. Because I think, I mean, I look at Georgia, look at Ukraine. So I think what's happening in Azerbaijan, we are breaking stereotypes. We are seriously, through our blood, through sacrifice, we are breaking the stereotypes. Thank you very much. This is just in terms of introduction. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your introductory remarks. It's very palpable and understandable in the situation where you are, where all your friends, citizens, colleagues, family members are, and then experiencing in a vivid way the calamities of the war, that you cannot be not emotional in this case, and then you cannot be not direct in your assessment and introductory remarks in that regard. And it's a way for us to hear that out as well, to see what comes in the situations as a challenge that I would only hope that many of us listening today would never experience in their lives, but those who went through the war, it's a situation in which it's hard to retain at times trust in the way how the norms that are created for all for equal application could work. But at the same time, obviously, I do believe that you share that view as well, as much as we all do, that it is the still common interest of all of us to make sure that we don't lose the trust in it. We put efforts in terms of making sure that the norms, the platforms, and then the tools that have been created, as we all have said, on the basis of common understanding of devastation of the global war, as it was the Second World War, that if not that, then we are at a much worse place as a community of states, as a community of nations, than with imperfect but developing still and cherished, hopefully in the future more, the body of law and then the organizations that are custodians of that. But having said that, obviously, it's hard not to acknowledge that we are, as many of you speakers have mentioned, are going through very painful transition at many levels as an international community. And it's not only with the conflict-related dimension of that, but even in pandemic-related situations that touched everybody around the globe these days. So one question that keeps always bugging me as being representative of a small country myself, with a very powerful revisionist power being an immediate neighbor to my own country, which is Russia in this case, is that the question of multipolarism. I mean, it's clear that we are out of this unipolar world, which has emerged after the dissolution of the Soviet Union. I can definitely not say that bipolar was a good one, because we were on the other side of the Iron Curtain. It was a hell to be on that other side of the Iron Curtain. But when it comes to where we are now, what does this even mean when we speak about multipolarism? Is it just the diversity of the poles, so to say, but then common rules that are applied to everybody on an equal basis? Or it's relativism, so that some are around the poles, so to say, where more freedom, more rights, more rule of law could be expected if you are a neighbor of that one big power particularly. And if you are unfortunate enough to be a neighbor or around the pole of the country that doesn't really give any regard to sovereignty, equality, and territorial integrity of its neighbors, what can you do? Bad neighborhood, bad geography, and then it's a different part of application of different set of the rules in a relative way. So do you think that we are entering that era, so to say, when it will be a distribution of the spheres of influences in a more accepted way, without applying the commonality of an umbrella of international law as it has emerged after the Second World War? Or if we put an action together, small nations, medium-sized nations, big nations who believe in the liberal rules-based international order, then we still have a good chance of not perhaps maintaining what it was, but building even a better system that could enable states to have more stability and peace and respect to the principles of international law. I would start in this case with Amre, if you would want to contribute with that question.
You want me to take the floor now?
Yes,
Ilaha?
if you could, yes, if you
yes.
would be good, because the region that you come from as well has suffered a lot with all of these transitions that have been long lasting in this regard. And multipolar world in many ways have been aspired in some parts of the world, where unipolar world has been seen as a deficiency of how the international community was being arranged. But do you see that multipolarism is an answer to it as it is emerging? And what is an implication of that on international law? Are we facing a challenge of ending up in different, or being around different poles of the globe, where we will have different set of the rules that will be applied to us based on where our geography lies and who is the big power as a big brother that is around us or close by?
Well, let me very briefly state the following. I don't see that the world is moving steadily towards a multipolar system. Mm-hmm. Still, the superpower will continue to be a superpower, well, with some changes, some question marks around its role, about the way of the policies in certain areas, but still, America is the most powerful country and will continue to be so for some decades to come. 1. 2. The United States has a very powerful soft power, very powerful soft power in all aspects of the soft power. Unparalleled. There is no other power that can match this very strong message hammering on our minds in all the continents around the world. Notwithstanding what China has started to do with its emerging soft power as personified in the Belt and Road project, bringing together around a kind of international economic cooperation policy involving countries that have reached, or approximately 70 countries in 4 continents. This is something unprecedented. Still, it's not showing the full potential of such a power, but an emerging one. The rest of the world has some significant strong points in this soft power, but not matching the huge one of the United States or the emerging one of China. This means that the unipolar system, to an extent, will continue as it is. That is, all this is number 1. Number 2, what do you mean by multipolar system? You mean, of course, the same. That is America, that is Russia, that is China, and Europe 4, and perhaps you add Japan and India and so on, some new emerging powers. This could be a system in the making. We agreed in our earlier interventions that we are moving within a transitional period. This transitional period might take 2 to 3 decades until things become clearer. The multipolar means that there are more than 3 or 4. No, this is not the case. 3 or 4 saying, yes, we are here. And we want to be ours. But they need the citizen in Latin America, in Asia, etc., to be of us now follow the daily activities of President Trump in the hospital and out of the hospital, so all of us, no matter what. And then the debate, all of us just turn on the TV to hear what they are doing. We don't do that with any other country. So we cannot talk about multipolar at this stage. At this stage, again, I remind you that we are going through a transitional period that might end up with a different system, but it is not a steady road towards multilateral multipolarism at this stage. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you very much. I mean, you might have sensed that I always have this cautious approach with different variations of multipolarism in a way, because I think that frequently it is mistaken for multilateralism at some point, because with the way how it sounds in my part of the world, multipolarism is rather scary. It's a big country in the neighborhood which sees all of us in its own backyard. And then in your own backyard, you are the master, and you are the master of the setting up of the rules under which everybody lives in your neighborhood. So that multipolarism is rather scary in the future. But the diversity of the poles in a way, and multilateralism in the best sense of that could emerge in the future, that's a completely different scenario, definitely, in this regard. Dear Maria, I would want to turn to you if that's all right with you. You've touched interesting points with relation to pandemic as well, and then the role of the UN with relation to human rights and development. Would you want to expand a bit on that? Do you see that because of where we are now with the pandemic, we are at the better place to understand that we actually need to put more efforts into it. So that is it sufficiently scary, so to say, what we're experiencing now to prompt more action, or perhaps we are still trying to dodge it as the international community and not being as forceful as we should be in putting common action together for the development related world, and then including for the climate change, for example.
Well, I think, first of all, you were saying, Eka, that we should define what a multipolar world means, because it can have different meanings, and I think Amre was describing multipolarism as multiple axes of power. And I think basically, the way I see a multipolar world is to identify how is the distribution of power in the world in general terms. And here I'm speaking, of course, I'm not a lawyer, and I think it shows, but I am a geographer, very interested in geopolitics. And basically, if we draw a map on the distribution of power worldwide, I think what we can say is that what we see is a variable geography, different geographies playing out. According to, for example, military power, the map is organized in a certain way. If you look at financial and economic power, the multipolar map is drawn in a different way. If you look at the technology power, perhaps your map, has to be drawn in a different way. And in my opinion, what we are witnessing is the organization of blocks, of groups of interest, of thematic coalitions. But unfortunately, these coalitions of the willing, unfortunately, I think they care very little about current global challenges, and they care more about self-interest. And the organizing principle, unfortunately, is greed and concentration of power. And I think that the counterbalance of these different thematic self-interest coalitions, the counterbalance of that is a strong multilateral system. Multilateralism is an equalizer of power in a way. Even if ineffective, I've heard with great attention to see, the system is disappointing, is not operating as it should. I also heard you saying, we need to overcome the trust deficit by walking the talk, by closing the implementation gap. And I fully agree with you. And I think that what we have heard during the past weeks, listening from heads of state and government, is loud and clear. We need to retool the multilateral system. We need to reform the UN. We need to take seriously the UN that is fit for purpose. The motto of my presidency at the General Assembly was to make the UN relevant for all, and really look at the efficiency gap, and really look at the transparency and delivery capacity of bringing the UN closer to the people, especially the people in need, including conflicts, and bringing the people closer to the UN in a way. So I think that, coming back to your question, because I think we're running out of time, I would speak about variable geography, a set of thematic and interest coalitions worldwide, and different balances of power. And these balances of power have to be equalized in a multilateral setting to avoid conflict, to address collectively the main challenges of our times, including the recovery from COVID, but also the climate crisis, the gender gap crisis, You know, I'm a strong advocate for women's rights. Thank God that Eka and I are here. Otherwise, we would have had, you know, an all-men's panel. And also the inequalities challenge. You know, we need to close the inequality gap, because inequalities, you know, we have seen with COVID, inequalities literally, you know, are killing us, are killing people in the poorest areas, are killing refugees, you know, are killing people without access to safe water and sanitation, etc., etc. And to address these shared challenges, to address the management of our commons, including our human security, we need a strong multilateral system.
Much fascinating comments, Maria. I want to turn to Fariz with the following question. You represent a very important institution, diplomatic academy, younger generation of diplomats, and then not only younger generation, but then for continuous education as well, those who are going through this institution. How do you see that in this era of perhaps this deficit of a trust that we face with international system and with application of the law? How do you see what generates that interest and commitment for the new generation of diplomats as well to trust that their skills, that their knowledge, their efforts are key, essential, so that they are dedicating their professional lives to their countries and then to the interest of the development of interest through the foreign policy platforms of their homeland in that regard? Do you see that they struggle with that? How you would assess that? I mean, do you see this in the younger generation as an issue that needs to be worked at in that regard?
Yeah, thank you for this question. You know, many young people have aspired to become diplomats. They were hoping that there is this romantic profession, that they will be building peace and prosperity around the world. But the truth and reality is that they get disappointed. They see that UN resolutions are not implemented. They see that there's no international law being observed. So there is a sense of disappointment among diplomats. Many of them, young diplomats and young students, they tell me that, you know, international system doesn't work. One thing I wanted to say is that, you know, in our curriculum, we have included courses on multiculturalism, tolerance, religious harmony. We take our students to synagogues, mosques, churches. We teach them the importance of living together, living peace and side by side in peace. We believe that, you know, educating Azerbaijanis in this way is the best way to build stability in the future. We are a country of multi-ethnic background. We have many religions in Azerbaijan, and I think Azerbaijan eventually will become a home for Armenians as well. They will live side by side. So we are teaching young diplomats and young students this ideology of multiculturalism and peaceful coexistence, which is very important for the future of our country.
Thank you very much. Interesting points, and I particularly pay attention to younger generation in many ways as well, and then to see how they could feel that relevance, as Maria mentioned as well, to the international system in such a ways that they don't lose trust in it. And then, especially if you dedicate your profession in this field, and then see that it's a valuable contribution to the future of your own country in this regard. Yeah, Abdulaziz, if you could comment to some of the elements of the questions that we already posed, and I would be particularly interested in your view on the younger generation as well. I mean, in your part of the world as well, do you see that the challenge of relevance of that kind, that international system could face as a deficit, so to say, with younger generation who lives through so many crises and then conflict situations as well, and current ongoing crisis in many parts of the region as well? How do you see that resonates in modern times now in your part of the world?
I think the new generations who didn't live the horrors and the atrocities of the Second World War and what came after it are aspiring for a different system that rules the world and organizes relations between countries and nations. They have witnessed the failure of the international order or international system in solving many existing problems, which they live in and see it in front of their eyes. And this is because pluralism, multiculturalism is
background sounds.
It's not here with me. This is a young boy or girl. I don't know where. Maybe in Istanbul. And they want to see a different system that governs the relations between countries and nations. Multilateralism is the solution because it is the consensus of many countries on one common goal, one common issue. And if those countries are strong enough to maintain peace and security in the world, there will be less problems and less wars in the world. Unfortunately, the five superpowers who have the right of veto in the Security Council did not, play this role honestly. They were interested on their own, gains and also overpowering the enemies. And we can see it right now between the United States and China. It's a new Cold War in a different way, but it is, a Cold War. And this is also because of the multipolar system that is getting, on the way to be a replacement of the previous, superpowers, which are the Eastern Bloc and the Western Bloc, the Soviet Union, the former Soviet Union, and the United States with the Western country. So the multilateral system is the best and has to be based on respect of human rights, respect of justice, not looking for, overpowering rights and justice because of this country wants that or that country wants this. We have to be honest in implementing the international law, the conventions that have been, adhered to by many countries in the world. There are few countries that do not adhere to international law, and I can name them. Armenia is one, Israel, and some other countries. We have to enforce the international law by the will of the countries that have the power to enforce it. And the new generations, not only in the Middle East and in North Africa, where I live right now, and many other parts of the world, but all the new generation all over the world, through the media, you can see them, through Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and all these, new channels and venues of communication. They say the same, word, the same language of hope for a better world, for a freer world, for a more safe world for everybody to live in.
Dear Elnur, if you could comment, if one looks from your perspective, from where you are now in the situation where Azerbaijan is, do you think that without reforming Security Council as the main custodian of common security regime, so to say, arrangement, one can have any hope that there could be orderly way of predictable application of either use of force or reaction to it as a way of resolving the conflict? If Security Council continuously fails, is there any hope that it could emerge as a resolution, or it's desperately needed to change that so that there is a different set of decision-making rules or the composition of it? Something that is discussed for a long time, but no recipe has been found so far acceptable to those who need to agree to that. But what's your view on that?
Well, definitely, I think that there is a common consensus that the Security Council shall be reformed, but also the practice shows that the Security Council, being the only being the only body in the UN which is giving the mandate to come up with the mandatory decisions, right? Mm-hmm. This is the only difference between the rest of the UN bodies. And these mandatory decisions are to be abided by all member states. So this is a very unique mandate, and definitely it is so far has been heavily, even decisions that were adopted have been heavily, let's say, lacking the enforcement. But I think that what's happening now, again, Azerbaijan is a good example of this, that some regional cooperation, regional alliances can deliver the justice or can help delivering the justice, which sometimes can replace Security Council's mandate. And again, coming back to the topic that you have just raised on the multipolarity and the poles, I think that this is one of the issues that we are facing today. Unfortunately, we are talking about poles. I know if you compare with the poles on the Earth, they're just the center of the coldness. I think solution lies in not having the multipolar world. Solution lies at having the world where a different center of gravities from the economic point of view. For example, European Union is not considered to be a superpower, but it's considered considerable center of gravity. Economic-wise, social life-wise, I think we need more this type of centers of gravities. And the key to coming up with this type of center of gravity is a regional cooperation. And also it's apparent that if the countries cannot come together for regional integration, I will not expect from them a lot for global cooperation. So successful regional cooperation is a good indicator if we are moving right direction, or if we are, as a global community of the independent states, are ripe or ready to come up with a proper solution. So that's why I think that now is what's happening overall, that multilateralism, unfortunately, has been seriously jeopardized, mostly to the position of the big superpowers, specifically those which are having the veto power in the Security Council. And I think that there will be tendencies, and I think also it also will depend on the quality of the states, to substitute this by regional cooperation. This seems more plausible, more feasible, and that should be the first stage before we come to the multilateralism in a global scale.
Thank you very much. Very interesting concepts. I mean, when you think about centers of the gravities in that way, you could always expect and hope that it's the center, the gravitation is working based on the forces of attraction, so that the gravitation around the center is organic, authentic, and then is based on the attractiveness of gravitational forces that make the system work in that regard, rather than oppression, and then that could be more characteristic to the poles in that regard. Dear Ekmeleddin, I'll give you the final floor for the comments. Sorry for keeping you waiting for so long, but then your comments would be even more interesting for us now as the final remarks that we could have in the panel. We overreached our time limitations. I have proven, I guess, that to be a very bad moderator, not being able to be keeping well with the timing. Dear Ekmeleddin, you're with us? I'm just trying to. Yes, you're muted if you are talking. Dear Ekmeleddin Ihsanoglu? Yeah.
Yes.
Please. Yeah, the floor is yours. You are muted, the microphone. Yeah, now it's working.
You are doing very well, and I think it has been very, very wonderful panel. My remarks are, in a way, a sum up and emphasizing certain elements. I do agree that multipolarism will not come tomorrow as a new world order. We are still living in Westphalia order. And the Second World War was not an end of Westphalia, but it was the introduction of America in Westphalia balance between Europe and America, emerging Soviet Union, etc. Since this is over, you have China coming in very strongly, road and belt, economy, and soft power, as Mr. Moussa said, is uncomparable with the American and Western soft power, certainly. But I think it will be one of the three powers dominating the world. Then you have India, next in the line, you have other countries. So it is not a matter of 1 decade or 2 decades that we are going to see a change, radical change, because Europe is getting weaker. And if look to something like pandemic COVID-19, Europe could not move in harmonic way. Every country, Italy is different, Germany is the French, the British, etc. So we are going to see, not we are going to see in our generation, but I think next generation, your generation, madam, will see this. This is number one. Number two, I think multiculturalism is the trend to come. And as we see populism and some radicalism, some racism in Europe, and some Western countries are emerging, we see multiculturalism in a country like New Zealand, like Australia, very successful. The Prime Minister of New Zealand, I think, should have been given Nobel Prize for peace, for internal peace. She did wonderful work. I think the Australians are following. Now you will see the same in Indonesia, in Malaysia. It's coming from Asia, from the South Hemisphere, multiculturalism. And this is the trend to consist or to establish peace in all societies. Whatever dominating race, ethnicity, culture is, multiculturalism is the future key for peaceful coexistence within countries. And multilateralism or pluralism is the key for a better world. Number three, regional cooperation. Regional cooperation will come. You will see that regional cooperation will make successful trends in different ways, in commerce, and as we see in COVID pandemic now, and in many other trends we see. So for the future decades to come, we have multipolarism coming, multilateralism is increasing, multiculturalism is successfully implemented, and regional cooperation. This is my modest contribution, madam. And thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been, for me, a fascinating discussion in this panel. I want to thank all of you for being able to participate on such a short notice in this important discussion. I hope that I enabled you to provide your views and opinions. And I want to excuse once again myself if for the time limitations we didn't have the full capacity perhaps to do it on such a vast theme that we could have covered for a long period of time. And I hope that we will have somewhat soon in a peaceful, stable and non-pandemic times, but soon still an opportunity to meet together in Baku, in Azerbaijan, during our famous yearly meetings of Nizami Ganjavi Center, so that around the tea and then not only in the conference rooms that we could discuss these issues, we can have a lengthy conversations on all of those issues that we have so much to share. And could only end with just optimistic aspiration. And I'm an optimist by nature, I would say myself, that it is not just the responsibility that we all have for our own future generations, for our children, for their children to come in the future, but it's our capacity and ability to do so as well that will build together a better world. And whatever the degree of contribution is that we have contributed previously, we are able to contribute even more in the future. And with that confidence in our capacity and values that bind us together, we want to close today's panel discussion. Wish you a very nice either evening or afternoon, or depending where you are, continuation of your day, and hope that I'll see you soon in better circumstances and to see you in person. soon rather than later, really. I hope so. Thank you very much. And thank you, Rovshan, for organizing this event. It's usually incredible capacity of putting it all together in a very efficient and short period of time. So I'm grateful for that. Thank you. Thank you all for participation. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rovshan.